Welcome to the deep dive. Today, you're joining us as we unpack a really persistent idea, the notion that we only tap into about 10% of our brain power.
It really is amazing how much traction that idea has gotten, isn't it? You hear it everywhere.
Oh, totally. Pop culture loves it, books, movies.
Right, like that movie Lucy, where she unlocks more and more brain capacity and gets, well, superpowers.
Exactly. It took it to such an extreme. But it's not just Hollywood, is it? You see self-help gurus promising to unlock that hidden 90%.
Precisely. It taps into that feeling, that hope that there's this huge reserve of untapped potential just sitting there.
Which sounds great, but it makes you wonder, where did it even come from, this specific 10% number?
Yeah, and how did it morph from like a misunderstanding into something almost like a conspiracy theory for some people?
That's what we want to dig into today. Our mission really is to trace the roots of the myth first. Look at the science, the neuroscience that actually debunks it.
And then explore that stranger turn, how it became fuel for these ideas about suppressed potential and hidden truths.
Right. So let's start at the beginning, the origin. It didn't just appear out of thin air, presumably.
No, definitely not. It seems to be more like a slow burn, a mix of misinterpretations from early science, maybe some slightly over-the-top claims.
And maybe just wishful thinking?
Probably a bit of that, too. You got to remember, back in the late 19th, early 20th century, understanding the brain was, well, it was early days.
Right, they were just starting to map things out, figuring out what different bits did.
And there were definitely areas where they just didn't know the function yet. It wasn't clear.
So the unknown bits might have been seen as unused bits.
That's a likely factor, yeah. These so-called silent areas. If you don't know what it does, maybe you assume it doesn't do much. Easy leap to make, I suppose.
Okay, so lack of knowledge gets misinterpreted. Makes sense. What else?
Well, then you have influential figures like the psychologist William James. He wrote about people using only a fraction of their mental potential.
Ah, okay. Mental potential, not physical brain parts.
Exactly. That's the key thing people miss. He was talking about our capacity to learn, to achieve things, untapped abilities, not like 90% of the brain tissue just sitting idle. It was more psychological.
That's a huge difference. So his words got twisted over time.
Seems likely. And maybe someone like Boris Cities, too. He worked on accelerated learning.
Right, pushing learning boundaries.
Yeah, and some of his statements, if you take them way out of context, could maybe sound like he meant unused brain capacity. But again, it was about learning efficiency, not dormant gray matter.
So, misinterpreting the thinkers, what about actual brain science back then, like lesion studies, damage to the brain?
Right, that's another piece. Scientists saw that even small brain injuries, small lesions, could have really severe effects, big consequences.
Okay, so how does that feed the myth? Seems like it proves every part is important.
You'd think so. But the flawed logic some people seem to follow was kind of backward. It was like, wow, if this tiny bit of damage causes that much trouble, then surely most of the brain must not be doing anything critical.
That's weird logic. It's like scratching your phone screen and deciding most of the phone's internals are useless.
Exactly. It's a terrible analogy for the brain, which is so interconnected. Damage one small, crucial part, and the whole system can be affected. But yeah, that misinterpretation seems to have contributed.
Okay, so early science limits, misquoting thinkers, misreading lesion studies. What about the self-help angle? You mentioned that.
Oh yeah, the self-help movement definitely ran with the idea of untapped potential. It's such a powerful selling point, right?
Absolutely. You're only using 10%. Imagine what you could do if you unlock the rest.
Precisely. It's inspiring, it's marketable. But that motivational message got tangled up with the literal idea of unused brain parts. And that's where science and the popular myth really went separate ways.
Okay, so that sets the stage for the myth's origin. Let's pivot to the science then. What does modern neuroscience actually say? How much brain do we use?
Well, the short answer is basically all of it. Modern neuroscience, with all the tools we have now, has pretty definitively debunked the 10% idea.
Tools like brain scans.
Exactly. Things like fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, which shows blood flow, indicating activity, PET scans, positron emission tomography, track energy use, EEG, measures electrical waves.
And what do these scans show? Big, dark, quiet areas.
Not at all. They show activity across the entire brain.
Yeah.
Now, not every single neuron fires at the exact same time, obviously. Different tasks light up different networks.
So it's more about coordination, different parts working together depending on what you're doing?
Precisely. Whether you're, listening to this, or walking, or remembering something, or even just resting, different combinations of brain regions are active in communicating. there aren't vast unused territories.
Even when we're resting or sleeping.
Yep, even during sleep, the brain is incredibly active. It's doing vital things like consolidating memories, clearing out waste products. Brain imaging shows significant activity continues through all sleep stages. No big silent zones.
And what about those lesion studies now, with modern understanding?
They actually strongly support the idea that we use all our brain. We now know in much greater detail that damage to even very small specific areas can cause very specific functional losses.
Like problems with language or movement or recognizing faces?
Exactly. If 90% was truly stare capacity, you'd expect most brain damage to have little effect. But that's just not the case. Every part seems to have a purpose. Losing even a small part is usually detrimental.
Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned evolution earlier.
Ah, yes, the evolutionary argument. It's pretty compelling, I think. The brain is incredibly expensive, metabolically speaking.
Uses a ton of energy, right? Oxygen,
A
glucose.
huge amount, yeah, way out of proportion to its size. So from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes zero sense to evolve and maintain such a large, energy-guzzling organ if 90% of it was just dead weight.
Nature doesn't tend to be that wasteful.
Not usually, no. Evolution favors efficiency. Carrying around a mostly useless high-maintenance organ. Highly improbable.
So imaging says active, lesions say important, evolution says unlikely to be mostly unused. What about down at the cellular level, individual brain cells?
Same story there, really. Research shows pretty much every neuron is part of the network, doing something. Either processing information directly or supporting other neurons that do. There's just no evidence for vast reserves of dormant cells.
Okay, so the science seems crystal clear, we use it all, but the myth hangs on. And as you said, it gets twisted into these conspiracy theories. How does that happen?
Right, this is where it gets interesting. The gap between the persistent myth and the scientific reality creates this space where, well, conspiracy theories can take root.
What's the core idea behind these theories?
Usually it boils down to the belief that the truth about our brain's amazing full potential is being deliberately hidden, suppressed.
Suppressed by whom? The government? Scientists? Some shadowy group?
It varies depending on the specific theory, but
Yeah.
yeah, often it's the scientific establishment, governments, corporations,
Yeah.
some powerful entity that supposedly benefits from keeping us limited.
Okay, let's unpack that. What kind of narratives emerge from this?
One common one is the control narrative. The idea is basically if people could access their full brain power, they'd be too smart, too independent, maybe too empathetic, just too difficult to control.
So keeping us at 10% makes us easier to manipulate, keep the status quo.
That's the gist of it.
Yeah.
It's a familiar trope in conspiracy thinking,
Hmm.
suppression for control.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the hidden abilities theory. This one is maybe more dramatic. It suggests unlocking more brain capacity wouldn't just make us smarter, but grant extraordinary powers.
Like telepathy, telekinesis, stuff like that.
Exactly. Things straight out of science fiction, often. And the conspiracy angle is that these powers are either feared by the people in charge or maybe even coveted by them, so they keep the knowledge locked away.
Wow. Okay, so moving beyond just intelligence into paranormal ability.
Pretty much. And connected to that is often a suppressed technology angle.
Meaning tech exists to unlock the 90%.
Yeah, the idea that there are devices, or maybe secret techniques, ancient knowledge perhaps, that could unleash this potential, but they're being actively withheld from the public. Kept secret by, the powers that be.
Only for the elite, maybe?
That's often the implication. And the specific flavor you sometimes see, especially in alternative health circles, is the pharmaceutical conspiracy.
How does that work?
The claim there is that big pharma profits from conditions associated with quote-unquote limited brain function, like ADHD, depression, anxiety. So they have a financial incentive to suppress any natural or non-drug methods that might allow people to reach their full potential without medication.
Ah, follow the money. So they supposedly want us to stay at 10% so they can sell treatments.
That's the core allegation in that version, yes. So you see these recurring themes.
Right.
Control, hidden power, suppressed knowledge, economic motives.
Well, where do they get their evidence for any of this, if the science is so clear?
Well, that's where it relies heavily on misinterpretations, selective evidence, and anecdotes.
But how do they misinterpret the science?
They often point to the genuine complexity of the brain, because we don't understand everything about it yet, and scientists are open about that. They take that uncertainty, those remaining mysteries, as proof of this vast, hidden, untapped potential.
So the frontiers of research become evidence for the myth?
Kind of, yeah. They might highlight brain plasticity, the brain's amazing ability to adapt and change and say, see, we can unlock more, while ignoring that this happens within the context of using the whole brain, just reorganizing it.
Okay, what about anecdotes?
Huge reliance on those.
Yeah.
Stories of people achieving amazing things through, say, intense meditation or hypnosis or some specific training regime. These are held up as proof of unlocked potential.
But ignoring other explanations, like maybe the story's exaggerated or it's the placebo effect or just some people have unusual talents naturally.
Exactly. Those alternative, more grounded explanations are usually brushed aside. The anecdote that fits the narrative is what matters.
And selective quoting. You mentioned William James earlier.
Yes, that's a classic tactic. Pulling quotes from historical figures or even scientists completely out of context to make it seem like they supported the 10% idea, while ignoring everything else they said or wrote, or the fact that science has moved on.
Cherry picking, basically.
Pretty much. And also appealing to unexplained phenomena. Anything science can't fully explain yet might be attributed to these hidden brain powers. It's a way of filling the gaps with the desired answer.
And I guess things like the movie Lucy get used as proof, too.
Oh, absolutely. People will reference fictional portrayals like Lucy almost as if they're documentaries based on suppressed knowledge instead of, just movies. It blurs the line.
It's a strange mix of misapplied science and wishful thinking fueling these conspiracy narratives. What are the motives again? Why would anyone want to suppress this potential? Control, hidden powers, money? Any others?
Those are the main ones. Control is huge. Keep the masses docile. Fear of disruption is another. Imagine if people suddenly developed telekinesis, right? It would overturn society.
Yeah, that would be chaotic, I suppose.
And the economic angle? Protecting industries that profit from the current state of things, whether it's pharmaceuticals or even maybe the education system, arguably.
And sometimes it gets linked to bigger conspiracies.
Yes, in the more extreme versions, the 10% myth becomes part of a grander scheme involving suppressed knowledge about, the universe, human origins, spiritual enlightenment. The brain becomes a key to unlocking everything.
Wow. It really spirals out. But okay, let's bring it back. What are the actual downsides, the real-world harms of people believing this stuff? Believing the original myth or the conspiracy versions?
There are quite a few, unfortunately. For one, it leads people down unproductive paths, wasting time, money, hope on products or techniques that promise to unlock the 90%, but are completely ineffective, or maybe even harmful.
Right, buying into scams based on pseudoscience.
Exactly, and potentially avoiding evidence-based ways to actually improve cognitive function or well-being. Another big one is fostering distrust in science.
Yeah, you mentioned that. If you think scientists are lying about the brain,
Then why trust them about anything else? Vaccines, climate change, you name it. It erodes that fundamental trust in evidence and expertise, which is pretty dangerous for society.
definitely. Any other harms?
Well, it just promotes a really poor, oversimplified understanding of how complex and amazing the brain actually is. If you think 90% is idle, you miss the wonder of how intricately the whole thing works together.
Hinders real understanding and maybe real progress in treating brain disorders.
Could do, yeah. And fundamentally, it just creates vulnerability. People wanting to believe in this hidden potential become easy targets for scammers selling false hope.
So the allure is strong, but the foundation is shaky, and the consequences can be genuinely negative.
That sums it up pretty well. The 10% myth, it's sticky, it's appealing, but it's ultimately fiction. The science is solid. We use our whole brains.
And maybe focusing on this imaginary, unused part distracts us from appreciating what our brains already do.
I think so. Our brains are already capable of incredible things, learning, creativity, adapting, connecting. That's where the real potential lies, in understanding and nurturing the brain we actually have.
So instead of chasing a mythical 90%, the real work is what?
Understanding our existing brain better, keeping it healthy.
Exactly. Focusing on how the whole system works, promoting brain health through good habits, sleep, nutrition, exercise, managing stress, and engaging in activities that genuinely enhance cognitive function, like lifelong learning, critical thinking, staying curious.
Using the potential that's already there, not searching for a hidden reserve.
Precisely. The real marvel isn't some untapped portion. It's the incredibly complex, fully active organ we possess right now. Understanding that is the real frontier.
That's a really great way to frame it, a powerful perspective. So maybe a final thought for our listeners.
As you go about your day, maybe think about this. What does true brain potential look like, knowing we use all of it? Is it some fictional superpower unlock, or is it the everyday magic of learning something new, solving a problem, connecting with someone, using the amazing whole brain you already have?
Something to ponder.
Definitely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.